everyone, to the psychology panel. Yes, we're so excited to have you all here. We have three wonderful panelists, two perfect faculty members here to help us facilitate today. I know we have some questions we all know that you submitted as you registered, and we will try to hit those as well. But I want to introduce our three panelists. We have Dan, graduated in 2008. Yes. Yeah, am I right?
2011.
Dang it, 2011, I aged you, I'm sorry. Who currently works in the nonprofit sector. We have Eric, who recently graduated just last year, and we have Adrian as well, who they're all gonna introduce themselves a little bit and talk about some of their background and why they chose their specific careers. So I just wanted to point them out. And then we have Dr. Flores and Dr. Hakeem, who will help us facilitate the panel. If you have questions as we're going, feel free to submit them in the chat, and we will try to address them towards the end. And other than that, we're just excited to have you, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Flores and Dr. Hakeem. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'll start off with our first question of the day, and then if you can just remind everyone before you answer the question, your name, your current career, and your alumni year, that'd be helpful at the beginning of the talk today. So our first question for our panelists today is, how did you decide to pursue the position that you currently are in? And what were some important factors as you made that decision to take that position? So let's start with Dan, and then Adrian and Eric can give us your thoughts on that question.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me. Always fun to come back to your alumni and share the little bit of wisdom you've learned since, and help some students, especially with the psychology department. Obviously a little biased. But yes, my name is Dan Weidenbender. I'm the executive director for Mill Community Ministries, which does community and economic development on the west side of Greenville County. And I have been doing that since really graduating. I started in 2012 and helped found the organization, and has kind of done some incremental growth. Mill Community Ministries runs a variety of social enterprises that do kind of targeted interventions to help do development work and help reach development goals that our community members help set. So we do that through Mill Village Farms, which is a youth-run community farm that helps provide healthy food access to our neighbors, as well as Village Wrench, which is a community-run bike shop that also works with youth and helps remove the barriers for our neighbors that need access to a bike, whether it be for daily living, to get to a job or work or healthcare, or for just recreation. And then we lead a social enterprise called Village Launch, which is a minority business incubator for largely women in our community that have home-based businesses, where we help them put together a business plan and help scale their enterprises. And then lastly, and I'll move on, we run Village Engage, which does kind of some faith-based community education and community organizing to help really solve some of the systemic issues that are occurring in our neighborhoods. So and how I pursued this world of really serving as an executive director, and much of my work is really rallied around partnerships in the community as well as fundraising. It was definitely, I would say, a slow journey. I did a lot of mission work while I was a student at some churches that were in Greenville. But I think one of the things that I also naturally gravitated towards was doing this kind of community building, networking. I can maybe talk about this later, but I was an RA at Furman that had a profound experience on me as well, of being able to build diverse communities. And I should say, if you haven't noticed, I'm a white, straight male, and I live mostly in a low-income African-American community that's also historic, as of 120 years old. And so I was absolutely an outsider and still am. And so being able to kind of plant myself and root myself in this neighborhood where I live and worship and work has been, an important decision for me, an important factor. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Dan, for introducing yourself and telling us how you started this path. It's awesome to hear that your time as an RA here on campus was helpful in helping you find that position or develop that position. So next up is Adrian, and again, the question is just how did you decide to pursue your current position, and what were some important factors in helping you make it?
Yeah, thanks. So starting off, I am the one who graduated in 2008. It's weird for me to be the old person because usually in my professional life, I'm the young person. So I'm an assistant professor of marketing at the University of Texas at Austin. But I took, I think, a bit of a meandering road to get here. So when I joined Furman, I fully intended to be a religion major because I've just always been curious about why people do the things they do and how they make sense of the world and the world around them. And in high school, I was fortunate enough to take some summer-long trips to different places. So I lived in Ecuador for a summer and then Thailand for a summer, and then started thinking about, beyond just like, are you Baptist or Presbyterian, which is kind of like the diversity I had growing up in Columbia, South Carolina. These larger sort of belief systems. And then my freshman year at Furman, my roommate took Psych 101, and he was like, dude, you got to take this class. And I did. And when I took that class, I realized that for me, a lot of my interest in religion and trying to understand that aspect of sort of making sense of the world was really a lot about psychology. And I sort of, also have this religion aspect, ended up double majoring. But then I got to the end of my Furman career and I had a couple of options in front of me. So I had interned at the South Carolina Department of Mental Health in Greenville with the Child and Adolescent Division. And it felt valuable, but it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Just personally, it was difficult for me to know that if I could potentially do that and not suffer from burnout, but I still wanted to do something that was valuable. And so I ended up with these options where I could continue on there. I'd been accepted to grad schools to go, get a PhD in psychology, or I was looking at the Peace Corps. And for me, I've had this always like nerdiness and curiosity, but also wanting to do something that felt like it was bigger than just me, that it was actually like good for the world. And those all seemed like opportunities to do that. But I felt like the opportunity to go to grad school, hypothetically at least, was one that not as many people maybe were fortunate enough to have, and where hopefully long term I could have an impact beyond just any one individual community. Not that that doesn't matter, that matters a ton, but sort of looking at, one of my options was to go work at this orphanage in Thailand, and that felt very personally rewarding to me. And it is worth a lot to sort of connect to humans and hug orphans. But I questioned if there was something I could do at a sort of higher level to do research or influence policy that would make it so there are like less orphans that need hugs. Turns out that I'm not studying that exact thing. But through my journey, so I ended up going and I got my PhD in psychology from Harvard. And then I ended up doing a postdoc in consumer financial decision making at the University of Colorado. And that's where I've really found this sort of conjunction of being able to do like nerdy psychology research. So I do social cognitive psychology research, do experiments. That's a lot of my job. But also I'm doing work that's related to, real decisions people make that have real outcomes for their lives. So not just financial outcomes, but well-being outcomes. And through that, I've been able to currently I work a lot with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is a branch of the government that tries to protect consumers. As of about a month ago, they care a lot about inequality. So that's been great because we've been able to do a lot of work in that area. And that's opened doors to do things where, for example, I'm not going to develop an app. That's just not my skill set. But this week I got to work with people who did develop an app that's meant to help low and middle income students in Chicago and Atlanta and Birmingham actually learn how to manage their own money. And they do that through paying them to take financial education courses, but then the payment goes into a stock fund that they get to control themselves, and then they invest into it when they turn 18. And so this is 12 and 13-year-old kids who are getting this education, but then also getting sort of some financial power over their own lives, which is just really exciting stuff. And so I think that's maybe the best part of my job is that I get to teach, which is, one way of sort of sharing knowledge with the world and encouraging, goodness, I think. I get to do research, which to me is personally validating, but also that research I feel like has value beyond just my own curiosity. And one way I've been able to see that have value, in addition to teaching, is through working with policy, which is really great. So that's where I am.
Thank you, Adrian, for sharing. It's awesome. I'm sure many students really can relate to the change in path, right? Sometimes you don't have to choose one path, multiple things. And Eric, you're up next. So again, the question was, how did you decide to pursue your current position, and what were the important factors in helping you make that decision?
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you for having me. It feels kind of weird still being on this side of the panel now, since I just graduated back in May. So it's still fresh through the whole new process. I am currently a research coordinator at Prisma Health in the Center of Research Addiction. And I specifically do research and clinical work with a lot of our Greenville population who struggles with opiate use disorder. And I'd say I found this passion in research a little bit later. It did develop, I'd say, more late sophomore year, early junior year. I had been involved in almost everything on campus. I was one of those people that sometimes did too much to do that they could probably handle, but everything went well. A lot of my work on campus was focused on diversity and inclusion with the Hispanic and Latino population in the community. And I knew from that I wanted to help people out, wanted to find some way that I can help people out. And I had taken a whole bunch of psych and neuroscience courses. And so I kind of wanted to find a way I can blend all those in. And it kind of led me up to where I am now. I knew I had to take a gap year to kind of take the time to really think through what my ultimate goal career was. I didn't have that set yet, but I knew getting some experience in research would help me as I developed that final career path. And so that's what I pursue. I talked to a lot of my professors, and I decided to take on that gap year and do some research. And it was really been a great experience so far. And I've seen a lot of the different things that I've studied academically at Furman and done socially as well help me in the position. And it's been a great journey so far. So it's still developing, but it's been great.
Thank you so much, Eric, for sharing. Congratulations on your position. Pass the mic to Dr. Hakeem.
Excellent. If I could just, share my joy for a second. There's so many, so much that's like I'm getting the initiators of so much that I feel the presence of at Furman. So for people who take 201, 202, I know several sections we assign a paper that Adrian and his colleagues wrote on the effect of smartphones, the presence of smartphones on, so that you're hearing from the person who did that. I love Village Wrench. I get my bike fixed there multiple times because it's messed up, and I had no idea, Dan, that's something that your team works on. And Eric, of course, hopefully some of us still remember because he was with us and he did a lot on campus. Just left us in this spring, and so it's really cool that we have this panel and doing so many different things. And I'm also want to say too, I think we're getting so much depth, which I think we should encourage from our panelists. And we might not get through everything. To our students who are listening, though, if things strike you, please put them in the chat, and us and Rebecca will be monitoring that. There might be some stuff that's really critical that we want to follow up with our panelists on. So I'm going to kind of, Dr. Flores, like rephrase the question because I think it can capture a couple of things, just because we only have 50 minutes with these three folks, so we want to maximize it. But the question that I'll first pose, if you could come back to Adrian, would be what is one or two formative undergraduate experiences? If the psychology department happened, that'd be one of them. But Dan mentioned being an RA. But for our psychology students, what are things that happened during your majoring in psychology that were formative for your current trajectory?
Yeah, so for me, the well, the number one thing was taking my first intro psych class with the late great Charles Brewer, who was awesome. But then, do y'all still have the Furman Advantage program? Is that still a thing? Okay, cool. So that is amazing. That enabled me to get 2 summer research positions. So Dr. Hahn, who I actually never took a class from, but we would talk about music, recommended me for a summer research assistant position with her doctorate advisor, and that was at Yale. And so I ended up working there, and that was my first experience doing research. And then at the end of that summer, I was talking with her about different people whose research I was interested in, and that led to the next summer having a research assistant position at Harvard, which is where I ended up doing my PhD. And so that both allowed me to see that, wow, I really like this research stuff, but it also set up some of those connections where, to be honest, who knows if they would really have looked at my resume as closely if they didn't know me and I didn't have some of that experience. So that was huge. And then also, if you're ever not sure, like another thing that's great is doing something and learning you don't like it before you really pursue that as a career, because it's a big commitment to go to grad school for 5 or 6 years. So if you can, I really encourage you to take advantage of that, and that funding helps a lot. I was living in Boston and eating Pop-Tarts for most meals, but I was able to do something that I was really passionate about and would not trade that for anything else.
Nice. Appreciate the Furman Advantage plug. I think the administration is going to be really happy about that. But that's no joke though. The university, going back to a graduate from '08, is providing support for our majors, for all majors across the university, to get involved with stuff and to not be burdened by the costs of, or not as much. There's financial support. You'll get money for taking part in these formative experiences, and hearing from one person who also used it as a way to get some off-campus experience. Your professors here are doing a whole bunch of stuff that's close to home that would be really seamless to get involved with. And it's some extra work, but there's also support for finding connections and getting involved with these formative experiences elsewhere. So appreciate that insight. Eric, how about you? Formative undergraduate psychology experiences.
I'd say what really helped me kind of develop my passion in clinical psychology, that's where my trajectory is right now, looking eventually in the future for a degree in clinical psych, was when I went ahead and took abnormal psychology. I've always known I've liked that aspect of psych, but I was always between neuroscience and clinical psych. And I quickly learned that you can definitely merge those two and do great things with them. So my first step was taking that, and then what really did it for me was taking clinical psychology, the course with Dr. Lundquist, and that really showed me that was something I wanted to pursue, and really motivated me to pursue research. And I also would say that the Furman Advantage as well. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have done research outside of the classroom. I had previously taken research methods with psych, and then also the research methods for bio, since at that time I wasn't sure yet. But once I took that opportunity and did research with Dr. Naus in the Spanish department, and we looked at my part more so looked at psycholinguistics, and it opened me to a whole new world of research, and I was really thrown back, and that's kind of how I saw the so many things you can do with just psych in general and research.
So cool. One thing I want to just to paraphrase, or just to notice some trends, is just I don't think this happens so much with Furman students, because you're at an institution like Furman because you want to work hard and do well in your classes, but your classes are really critical. Like, they're not just things to get through and to get a grade, but stuff happens there in the grind of attending and talking to the professor and completing the assignments. Eric's taking a class because it's and it's interesting, and obviously like the content has fueled you, and the same thing with Adrian. So just some nice reassurance that doing well in your classes and just really doing your best and learning as much as possible, not just getting through it, is critical. And Dan, how about you? Formative undergraduate psychology experiences that helped guide your trajectory.
Yeah, well, I definitely can relate to what everyone else is saying for sure in this group. As I mentioned already, definitely being an RA I worked with the Engaged Living program with freshmen, so it was always just like bringing this highly motivated group of pretty diverse students for the most part together and trying to build a team and unity. But I also was able to take advantage of some of the Furman perks. I did an internship. I did a fellowship really with the Shy Center for Sustainability when they were first launching these kind of community-based fellowships. And I was able to merge that with some research that I did with Michelle Horhoda, studying really the benefits of community gardening with older adults. And it forced me to get off campus and really see Greenville as this kind of like living, learning lab that could really not only benefit me as a professional, but also benefit the community and see this kind of two-way street, which provided a lot of connections, frankly. I was similar to Eric, I can relate to being over-involved on campus by the time I was really finishing up. And I had some of these experiences where I thought, oh, I really want to learn more about this, but frankly, I didn't have time to read or research or travel while I was a student on campus and learn more about, things like community development and economic development was something I didn't have the opportunity to learn while being a student, but I knew it was something I had a seed of an idea of getting off campus and meeting, professionals in the Greenville community. And so I kind of decided to take this kind of gap year and really try to, push and learn things that, frankly, the classroom couldn't do that for me. And I didn't have necessarily that kind of experience, as well as really just pursuing kind of entrepreneurship. And I say that's changing because I'm involved a little bit in the new institute at Furman for entrepreneurship and innovation that just got launched. And I think that's a new asset that was not there when I was there. And I think that's such a great opportunity now for students of all different majors and backgrounds to be able to pursue ideas and startups and understanding what entrepreneurship is and taking an idea, which is similar to research. But that program to me is something that I'm really eager and excited of how it grows at Furman. That wasn't there when I was a student, but I think is now a great asset to all the folks that are on this call that are currently students. So.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Panelists, turn it back to you, Dr. Flores.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to skip a question here and go straight to directly thinking about when you were undergraduates again. What advice do you have for students who are considering their options for post-graduation, specifically for students right now, right, who might be considering post-graduation in a little bit of a different world than what it might have been a couple years ago? What advice would you like to have received, or what would you wish you would have known as you were approaching graduation? So let's start off with Dan again, and we'll go around in the loop.
Yeah, this is a great question. I get the privilege of working with a lot of Furman students with my job because a lot of them reach out to me because I am in the Greenville community and get to help mentor students. And I would say that some of the best advice, I think, for me, when I look back at my experience is, you don't have to have, for me at least, and I know that the type A mentality that I think is largely present on the Furman campus is that you have to have your whole life plan figured out before you graduate. And frankly, I thought I had a plan and I feel like there's this kind of psychology, and I can't remember, and I should, as you get closer to that test, your expectations may be like, diminish. Maybe some of the faculty members can help me. I can't remember of the concept, but I think of just grounding yourself in reality, that you don't have to, have this, 5-year, 10-year plan figured out by the time you graduate from Furman, and taking that burden off of you, I think provides some liberation for you to actually pursue some decisions. Another thing at Furman that I experience, and I see a lot of students experience, is a paralysis by having so many decisions and so many choices and so many options that frankly, the whole world is at their fingertips, and the paralysis of being able to just make a decision. And it's not something that you have to commit to. So I always encourage, to me, taking a gap year, looking at leadership development opportunities that you can do for 1 year or 2 years. I was, when I was a student and a freshman, I thought I was going to go and get my PhD and, pursue clinical work, which thank God that changed, because I can't tell you how fulfilling the work that I get to do now is, that I would not have known as a junior or senior, frankly, at Furman, and giving myself space to explore things out in the real world, outside of kind of from going from high school to Furman. There was a very controlled experience, and being able to get those guardrails off and go and learn and explore on your own. I think giving yourself that freedom, I think, has proved super beneficial for me. So that's some of the best advice I like to give to students, and I wish I knew, and I wish I didn't have such a um, rigid view of what post graduation needed to look like.
Thank you, Dan. I'm sure most of us agree with that 100%. Adrian, you have anything to add on that thought? Anything you wish you would have known upon graduation?
Yeah. So I would just echo the sort of emphasis that Dan had on, being willing to explore and be wrong about what you thought, you were going to do with the rest of your life. It's admirable to have sort of everything laid out and to have sort of a trajectory, that you think is going to bring you fulfillment or impact. And maybe that's right, but there's nothing wrong with being wrong. And one of the best things you can do is just get experience and then reflect on that experience and sort of see if that matches up with, what you really want for your life. So even before I got to Furman, I did a vocation training institute, which I believe was with the Lilly Center, but, at Furman's campus. And, the point is that, your vocation is not just your job, but think more about, the role that you want to play in the world, and be willing to sort of try on different roles, in different jobs, and see how that actually fits. So I think that's the biggest thing. If you're interested in research specifically, so, I'm the one who went sort of the academic track. What I would say is that this is actually a great time in a lot of ways, and to get experience, because you don't have to move, because everything is virtual. I haven't been to campus since March, but I'm working with people, and we're having research meetings, and our lab managers are in different areas of the country, and so that allows you to get some experience that hopefully doesn't map onto exactly what it'll be going forward, but you get a sense of sort of what that life is like, what that world is like. And, there's very little cost to finding somebody whose work that you're interested in and just reaching out and seeing if there's a way you can help. Like, the worst they can do is say no, but they're not going to think poorly of you. They're going to think highly of you. And chances are that you are better equipped than most to jump in and actually be useful and be helpful, because Furman, relative to any other school I've seen people come from, it's just the students, including me, I've benefited from this, are just so well prepared to actually think critically. And that's one of the biggest things about research. So yeah, this is a good time.
Thanks, Adrian. It's perfect timing as we are approaching that Furman Fellowships application deadline, everyone in the audience. But Eric, what would you tell? What kind of advice would you have liked to receive, or would you give yourself?
I would echo everything that has been said so far. I think it's true. You don't need to know, and that's something I struggled with coming out. And I know, Dr. Flores, you know some of that too. I think my advice would be, don't be afraid to ask for help if you find yourself in that situation where you don't know what to do. It's more normal than you think it is. I know for me, when back in spring, a little bit before that, that's where I was. And if it wasn't for me reaching out to my professors, the Malone Center, and really anyone that I saw as a mentor, I wouldn't have had that much clear direction, or it would have taken me longer at least to get there without that help. And then another thing I'd say is really just emphasizing the importance of networking, and staying in contact with those people who you've met, even if it's from back in high school, you've met a mentor from there. To really anyone, networking really helped me find the position I had currently right now. So those two things, being willing to ask for help and making sure you keep in contact and expand your network.
Thank you so much, everybody. This has been chock full of information and resources here. We are approaching 1 p.m. So we have just 20 minutes left in this short talk today, but we wanted to, I think Dr. Hakeem reached out to the chat at this stage.
Exactly, yeah. Now that we have originally planned for about 30 minutes of prepared stuff, and the panelists got to a lot of stuff because there's really a lot of stuff packed into the responses. And at this point, I want to make sure that, in addition to the responses that we just got that probably touched on some things that you're curious about, that we give you a chance right now. Maybe something that the panelists said sparked a question for you. And you also sent some questions beforehand. So now's the point where if something's on your mind, please put it into the chat and we're going to keep our eye on it. Give you about a few seconds to do that. And in the meantime, I'm going to ask like a really practical question that we might be able to get through relatively quickly. And we'll wait for other questions that come up in the chat. And if anything comes up, you all sent in some good ones when you registered, so we can keep going with that. So one practical question I think gives a sense of like, logistics of how things work out. And we can start with you, Dan, of how difficult was it to find a job and how many jobs did you apply to?
Yeah, great question. Gosh, now I got to remember. Yeah, I was pretty set on I found a leadership development program that I was pretty interested in. I was pretty set on that and got in. And it was like, really like Eric said, I was mining the network that I built already while I was a student. So in many ways, I got into that program because of the connections I made while being a student. I think I only applied to one or two. And I think as a backup to, I was pretty set and felt pretty confident I was going to have that role. And I don't think I figured that out until, I want to say, maybe winter break of senior year. So to just give you a rough timeline.
Cool. And yeah, time that is nice. That wasn't in the question, but I'm thinking of our students, and the more details that you have to provide about just like what your life situation is like. I think it can be really nebulous to see just you've arrived where you are right now, and you sharing your trajectory and the ambiguities and the specifics of where you applied, how many times, and connections. All that stuff is really valuable. Just to give students something to imagine for themselves, the multiple possibilities for you to imagine for yourself. Adrian, can I ask you how many, maybe for you it would have been grad schools, but you also applied to the orphanage. How wide did you apply, and how hard was it to find a job, a position?
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, it was not super difficult because of the opportunities that I'd had at Furman. So I had an opportunity to stay on at the South Carolina Department of Mental Health, and I started that internship while I was at Furman, and that was facilitated by Furman. And then I ended up getting in, I think I applied to 12 grad schools and got into 10 or 11, including the places where I had done my summer internships through Furman Advantage, right? And then with the orphanage, that was the place that I'd worked in high school. So back to Eric's point about networking, that was a place where I had not been in a while, but there was need. And so those relationships and sort of opportunities that you can form and pursue while at Furman, I think are really helpful, or at least were for me. So I ended up getting accepted to, I think, 10 or 11 of the grad schools where I applied, which again, very fortunate for that to work out. And then, there's another job market after that, which is getting a job as a professor, which is, I'm not going to lie to you, not easy. It is a tough job market. There are more people graduating than there are positions, but there are lots of different things you can do with, for example, a PhD in psychology. So I have my PhD in psych. I'm working in marketing. The reason I wanted to do that was because I wanted to do work that had more sort of applied relevance, and to be able to work with, people in government and people in business, because I think that's exciting. But there's also, I've got friends who have PhDs in psych who work for Etsy and who work for Snapchat and who work for Facebook, although the ones who work for Facebook don't like to talk about it. But, there are lots of different opportunities because there's a lot of value to social science and thinking about how people work, and especially thinking rigorously with data about how people work.
Adrian, can we stay with you? Eric, I want to ask this question to you, but because Adrian, you brought it up and Nicole's asking a question to this point, if you see it there, just wanted to learn more about your experience collaborating. I don't know if you're consulting directly with the government or if it's kind of a collaboration, but just walk us through a little bit about how that's like to work with pretty important agency like that.
Yeah, it's really cool. So the way that this came to be was through my postdoc, which was focused specifically on consumer financial decision making research. And so my take on anything is that if it's an important question, you probably need to come at it from multiple angles, right? And so like the angle I know about is experimental psychology, but like I'm not good at machine learning, but I've worked with people who do machine learning stuff. I'm not an animal expert, but I've got a paper with chimpanzees in it, right? So, you know, you work with the people who are relevant for that question. And then if you're thinking about financial decision making, the regulatory system matters a lot. And so through that center, we were able to hook up with people from the Federal Reserve, from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We also have like anthropologists and sociologists all kind of coming together to say, like, what are the real problems facing consumers in these areas, and what do we know about it, and what can we do about it? So I'm actually connected to the CFPB through a few different things. But right now, the primary one is looking at financial skill and how to help develop financial skill through financial education. Then there's another with older adults looking at people who are perhaps widowed or single later in life and where they go. So it's very like practically motivated, which is cool. Like any government thing, it's every meeting, it's like really encouraging, and they're like, all right, is anything going to happen after this? And like half the time it doesn't, right? But you just got to keep pursuing because there are amazing opportunities. And so, you know, even if it's just getting to choose what survey items go into a national survey that gets, you know, measured every 2 months, like that's huge in terms of data collection. And so I'm on the expert panel for financial skill. And so we get to define how financial skill is measured, which is pretty cool. And the people who work there like really, really care. And they're eager for those collaborations. So that's exciting. And then the other one that I'm involved with is with data privacy and personal ownership of your digital footprint. So that's more related to my work on technology. And it turns out, right, we live in an attention economy. And so our personal data is worth a ton to businesses, and businesses are making a ton off of it. Now there's policies being passed that have to do with, you know, whether or not people should be compensated for the use of their own data. And that is actually a financial question and a psychological question, because it gets into like, how do you value something that like you can't see, but you generate, but it feels like it's kind of free, but actually has a ton of value. And so from a government perspective, they might just say like, well, consumers can make the rational choices. But from a psychological perspective, we're like, well, how do we actually think about this? And so usually, like in that one, I'm the only psychologist in the room, but I think it's important to have a psychologist in the room.
Fascinating stuff. Thanks. Eric, to you, the question was kind of the specifics, logistics. You talked about this a little bit actually when you mentioned the gap year, but how hard was it to find a job? How many places did you apply?
Yeah, I'd say mine was a little bit different. I won't lie, it wasn't easy, and I think that was mostly because when I started applying for jobs, it was back, I want to say, early May, right at the epicenter of when everything was beginning to shut down due to COVID. But I'd say I applied to at least, I'm going to say 10 different positions, and they were all over the place. Honestly, it's hard to find research positions in Greenville, really in South Carolina. That's something I learned fast. But really what helped me through that process was the Malone Center. They kind of helped me navigate, find what was the best choices. And I got the offer, I want to say I got my final offer back in late July, and then I didn't start until mid-September. So there was still a waiting period even after I got accepted due to, you know, the pandemic. But I think if it wasn't for that, it may have been a little bit smooth sailing. But really, the Malone Center helped with that, even within the crisis. And they were the ones who reminded me to tap back into my network, and that's kind of how one thing led to another, and I ended up working in the research department over here at Prisma in September. So, yeah.
Awesome. We have just a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to, we haven't had any questions in the chat, so I'm going to go with what students submitted earlier. So I would say many of you talked about your experience at Furman, but one question that really stood out that I think is probably true, a question that male students have is, has Furman really prepared you for the workforce? And if so, can you give specific examples? I know you've talked about your experiences and doing activities at Furman or being involved, but has it really prepared you? And can you give precise examples on how that might have been? Sorry about that. We can start with Eric and then go in reverse order this time.
Yeah, I would say, given my current position that I am in right now, I would say Furman has prepared me more than I expected, really in just research in general. A lot of my colleagues who I'm working with either have their masters or are way well more experienced than I am. And when we come back to questions about research methods and data analysis and stuff like that, I seem to be the one quickly, might just be because it's fresh in my head too, that is very well in tune with all that language and lingo. And it's really cool to see that paid back. And I'd say, just to reiterate, some of the courses that really helped me have that level up, even compared to some of my colleagues who have an MS, a master's in something, are really research methods. Like, really pay attention, really take notes, like really study it. That's something that will help you in the long run, I think, in everything. Clinical psych really helped for my current position in terms of research, because it really helped me really digest literature at a different level than you would in your typical research methods course, looking at the differences of treatment outcomes and comparing them. And it's even helped me right now where I'll be helping publish a systemic review for one of our studies that we have here. So that's the one-up experience I got, and I'm the only one with a bachelor's that's going to be helping out with that. So I think that's pretty cool. And then another one that has helped me a lot, and this was a little, shout out to Dr. Flores too, her multisensory integration course. That course is super interesting, and really it goes more into the grant writing process of how to develop ideas, how to develop research questions, and kind of she walks you through some of the process of writing grants. And that's something that I've recently also have found myself doing, working with the IRB, helping write up grants, and really, that really helped me in a lot. And I can't just like reiterate how much the courses that you take are important. Even with social psych and my experiences outside of that, I do some of the community outreach as well for the opiate use disorder, and providing tools and kits for some of our patients once they leave to be well equipped in the case of any emergency. And it really makes you think of what are the necessities that they have, where are they coming from, their backgrounds, how does that affect treatment, and just how personal psychosocial characteristics really impact how treatment for someone looks like in the long run or when you're recruiting participants. So I'd say it's a big spiel, but really the courses you take are super informative and helping in the long run if you put in the work and really you digest everything in.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you for the shout out. And know that all of our capstone courses have similar like ideas behind them. So we really want to throw you into that research, and everybody takes a different one, but regardless of the topic that you're placed in, that's the goal, to really immerse you in that process. Thank you, Eric. Adrian, you're up next.
All right, so this might be a little more direct, or it's just as direct, because my job is research and teaching. And so while I was at Furman, I got experience with research, and then I got to learn from awesome teachers. And that's really it. So, I really think that the education you get both in the classes and through research opportunities is beyond anything I've seen at any other school. And that's also sitting on this side where, we just looked at PhD applications. We had 140 people applying to the grad program, and coming out of undergrad, nobody's better prepared than people from Furman. And that's really awesome. And so, for example, during the summer research position I had at Harvard, I was there. There was another Furman student there, my best bud since high school, Mike Spinelli. And then everybody else there was from Harvard and Duke. And we were by far the best trained and best equipped people to actually step in, understand what was going on, and like contribute to the lab as opposed to just, handing out surveys and things like that, which there's, somebody's got to hand out surveys, but it means a lot more when you can actually be engaged in that learning environment and know what's going on. And then the other thing is on the teaching end. You've got amazing professors who are incredible teachers. And when I teach, really all I'm trying to do is mimic how I was able to learn at Furman and try to encourage learning by doing and engaged learning. And it's been successful. So last year I was named the best assistant professor in the business school for teaching, and then named to this 40 best professors under 40 for business school stuff by Poets and Quants. And it feels good, but also it's like, this is how you're supposed to teach, right? This is how it goes. And it's really just picking up what I learned from Furman. And so that's not just if you're going to be a teacher or professor, but it's also about interacting with people. There are a lot of, opportunities in life to teach, right? Whether it's formally or informally, and sort of noticing how you're learning and noticing how you're being taught is something that I would encourage to do and try to learn from.
Thank you, Adrian. Congratulations. That's an amazing accomplishment. And we just have a couple minutes left. I know we're crunched on time, but Dan, did you want to have any last bits?
Yeah, I'll be the other side of the coin, maybe the bad guy here. That I remember when I first graduated, thinking that Furman didn't actually really prepare me for the workforce as someone who's not in research or in higher ed. And I remember actually going back to faculty members, particularly in the psychology department, and thinking like, oh, I didn't have these experiences that I actually saw students in other universities have that helped push me towards really the world that I'm in is in kind of entrepreneurship and enterprise development. And I didn't have those necessarily. Like, I had a lot of great research experiences that I frankly, and my path, frankly, at Furman, and I know a lot of students' paths are, and mine was no different, of going into grad school. And I think Furman did an unbelievable job. Like, really, I think what Adrian's saying, probably the best experience in the country, frankly, to getting you into grad school and to PhD programs. Because I have peers, that graduated with me that are doing unbelievable things in higher ed and research. But I would say in the world that I am in, I frankly did have some troubling, feedback. And I think where I feel like I try to help course correct folks is giving yourself the space, like I said before, of being able to read and research things that maybe your faculty member or your classes are not hitting on, because there is another world outside of that. I can't tell you, I was certainly a big nerd in the psychology department and lived in Johns Hall. And I can't say how much I enjoyed that kind of experience. And I would say where it did, prepare me, particularly within the psychology department, that I do carry with me today is a lot of really critical, I feel like, writing skills, a lot of writing. I remember that is super helpful for whatever career you go in. I think is just foundational. I feel like I'm better prepared than my peers from other institutions. I'd also add critical thinking and problem solving. I feel like the foundations of research and interning and the engaged learning experience at Furman and the Furman Advantage really helped prepare me to be able to solve problems and to be able to think on my toes and make really, I feel like, educated, well-rounded decisions. So I feel like as I get older, I look back more fondly at it preparing me more for the workforce. I do think as a whole person, it did prepare me as being an entire adult, frankly, of the experiences that I got both academically, and socially, and just, physically, all of the things. I feel like Furman did prepare me in a lot of great ways. So I don't want to be too hard, but I did want to provide another side, another maybe perspective that's in another, field.
Thank you, so Dan. I'm sure many students can relate to that feeling. You come out, it's kind of a shock, and then it's trying to pick up on it as time goes. Well, thank you so much. We are just out of time. Thank you for all our attendees who have come. Thank you for our panelists for giving us this rich information. We cannot be more grateful for your time. And thank you for those who've sent their emails. We'll make sure to pass that to our students, and we wish you the best. Keep Furman's spirit alive, and thanks again. I guess we'll call it a day.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate our thanks to our panelists. Not to put more pressure on it, but at least a couple of panelists shared emails, which was very generous. So if you, they obviously have a lot of care for for Furman and for you as their fellow Furman students. So reach out. This is part of networking. You have us as your professors. You have other alumni that really care about you and want you to do well.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And I believe a survey will be sent shortly, later today or at some point. So if you wouldn't mind taking the survey on the panel, we really appreciate it, students. And thank you again, panelists. This was awesome. Couldn't have asked for better. And we will be sure to stay in touch, and hope everyone has a great weekend.